think we live in a world today where borders aren't really, it's only a construct in our mind and in social agreement. But I don't know, if we had to put up our hands here, how many people haven't traveled overseas in the last 2 years? No. I think Jordan's going over pretty soon now. So everybody here has traveled. Has anybody noticed that it's becoming more and more expensive to travel overseas recently? Haven't noticed it at all. Not at all. So I think why we're here today is really to reciprocate gifts. So I think the greatest gift that you guys have given us this morning really is a piece of your life. It's your time to be here this morning, and I'm exceptionally thankful for that. And I'd like to reciprocate that with our time, and show you what my purpose is and why I'm here, and show you that not only are we going to give you our time today, but if you do partner with us, we give you our time forever. So I think it's the greatest gift you can give anybody is your time and your love. And on top of that, I want to show you how we can create freedom of choice for ourselves by avoiding certain things, avoiding certain risks, and just thinking maybe slightly differently and a little bit out the box. And we'll go into some of the details on how we combine these philosophies with an actual investment that produces real money in order to tide us back. And we are global citizens. We travel, we live globally, and yet we continue to think in rands. And a lot of times I get the comment when people are like, when I'm talking numbers, I'm always talking in dollars, and oftentimes the other person's thinking in rands, and then there's a bit of a cross communication. I've just simply been thinking in dollars for so long that it's become part of my construct. But if we don't think in dollars in terms of our wealth, we're going to get wiped out in rands if we look forward over 10, 15, 20 years, because we have been wiped out if you look backwards in the long-term trends over the last 30 years. Rand depreciation has been on average 6% a year for the last 30 to 35 years, whether it was, doesn't matter if it's old government, new government, doesn't matter. We have to depreciate our rand in order to be globally competitive as an export country. So if we remain rand prisoners, our wealth and our time and our freedom of choice is going to get wiped out. So to break free of this rand prisoner thing, we need to build wealth in first world countries in order to protect ourselves. That's at least my belief. That's what I've helped a lot of people do. We've helped a lot of people buy property overseas very successfully. And we have a choice. And today I just want to show you a little bit of the numbers. The choice is not about South Africa versus USA in terms of, oh my goodness, I love that, or I hate this, or whatever the case may be. I love living in South Africa. I love the lifestyle we have here. I love everything about this place. Morning. But I also know that we have some inherent economic and political risk that I need to take into account for my family's future. Yeah. And it's important for me to think as a responsible investor, how do I protect the wealth that I'm creating as well as grow the wealth? And if I can do both at the same time, that's fantastic. If it can give me the freedom to choose what I want to do with my life and how I want to live it, then that's phenomenal. So if we have to just compare a simple standard South African property investment. So this is going to be a vanilla versus vanilla, and let's just do the numbers and see if any of this stuff makes sense. If we buy a 1 million rand property in South Africa with transfer duties and all that stuff in place, and we borrow 700,000 on a bond at 10% interest, put down 300 rand as a deposit, our bond repayment is going to be roughly 7 grand a month. These are rough numbers. If you want the spreadsheet, I'll happily share it with you. Body corporate rates and taxes, all the rest of the stuff is 3 grand a month. Rental income on a 1 million rand property at 10 grand a month, that's a 12% yield. That's a pretty good property in general terms. And then we've got to hope that the tenant always pays on time and that we have no vacancies and all the rest of that stuff. And in terms of cash flow, we're at zero. So what do we hope for in this situation? Capital appreciation. We hope the price goes up. And it keeps going up. It has been doing in the Western Cape quite well, but for the rest of the country, maybe not so well, and it very much depends on the sub-market that you're in.
So that's quite an optimistic view. The reality is that if you take, if you invest in a property here in South Africa, we know that the first 5 to 7 years, which is usually the period that you're negatively gearing it, and we're putting in 5 to 10% of what's required to cover the debt, the rates, the taxes, the levies. Usually 5 to 7 years in the red before it becomes break even. I mean, Brendan's illustrating here break even from day one, but it's 99% of the time it's not like that. And
So it depends on the size of the deposit and if you can find a property for a discount. But if we extrapolate that even further, we hope and pray that property prices go up, that the tenants always pay, that we never have to try and get a tenant down. Who's got property here in South Africa? Can I just see a show of hands? And keep those hands up for a second. Put your hands down if you've never had any tenant issues. Keep them up if you've had tenant issues. I'm sure you can share some more stories. So I just kind of got tired of that. I don't need headaches in my investments, especially when I go to property seminars like I did when I was 23, 24 years old, and people sell me passive income, and then I end up working my tail off in my passive income. So we hope and pray that everything keeps going well, and we never have to go find more money to keep plugging into these investments. And if 1 million rand property grows to 2 million, we have to take into account capital gains taxes. If we exit, we have to pay agents' commissions. Depending on how you're structuring it, if it's in a PTY limited company, we're going to pay some tax on some profits. If you're holding it in a trust, it's even more tax. So we have some interesting situations to deal with when it comes to tax, and it depends on your structure how much you're going to end up paying. But you're going to pay something if you exit. If you refinance, maybe you can take some of that profit out. But the question becomes, have you actually made any money if it's grown at 12% a year for 7 years, which is pretty aggressive growth, and you've doubled the value? If we take into account inflation and the rand depreciation over the last 30 years, in dollar terms, in your global buying power, where do we end up?
Yeah, so again, just want to say that if you've got to measure your wealth, you should be measuring your wealth in dollars. So the things that we have to fight, really, as Brendan said, these two things that are very difficult to fight. You're fighting 6% devaluation of the rand against the dollar over 30 years, and you're fighting 6% inflation. So you're going to be 12% ahead compounded every year if you're measuring yourself in dollars to be a break even. That's the part that, for me, that I can't get my head around.
So we're going backwards even when we've got great investments in South Africa because we think in rands. And we're going backwards at quite a rate. We're either just breaking even or we're going backwards. So put it in perspective, I used an inflation calculator online last night to figure out what the actual numbers were, and we would need 2.2 million rand in 7 years' time in US dollar value to equal 1 million rand in today's money. So even if we sold this for double the money, we'd still be minus 500,000 rand in global buying power. And if you want to know if that's actually true, just have a look at what it costs you to travel, what it costs you to buy citizenship overseas, what it costs you to buy an apartment overseas. We have inflation in global terms as well. We have to be aware of that. And if we just compare that directly to the same calculation in the magic guide, anybody that's in property, you can see where the magic is. Doing nothing else except getting a lower interest rate. If we buy a $1 million property with a 30% deposit and a 70% bond at 4.5% interest over 30 years, because we get that quite regularly, our bond repayments 42 grand a year, our rental income 65 grand a year, because after expenses we're getting about a 6.5% net yield, which means cash flow, positive cash flow out the gates, $23,000 a year, which is a 7.6% cash on cash.
Just pause there for a second. This for me I mean, what Brendan's giving you now is all the stuff we've done and all the stuff we've learned over the last 8 years doing this together. That for me is like, you buy property in South Africa, you negatively gear it. You buy property in America, you're 7.6% cash on cash ahead from day one out the door on almost a similar product. So for me, and it's dollar based, obviously. So for me, this is like was the revelation. Unless you're a property developer where you're getting 40 or 50 IRR,
Excuse me, can I just ask a question? On the previous slide you had levies and things like that you don't have on the next slide.
So the reason
do they not have levies there?
We do have it, but I'm showing you the after expenses income of next slide.
Okay.
Because the way we're buying properties, we're buying the entire building and it's all rolled into one kind of expense sheet. So if you're buying an individual property in South Africa, we've got to take that into account, but on this side it's the after income.
Part of the
Yeah, so after expenses income, we're getting 6.5%. To equate this to the South African property, if you have a look here, we actually have to pay cash for this property and negate the benefit of leverage in order to get the same cash flow on a US property. We have some other magic that we bring into play as well. So the first time Kevin saw this cash on cash yield, we bought a medical building in Atlanta. We paid 16 point something million for it. We co-invested together into that building with a bunch of other investors. And the cash on that one, we had a 2-year interest only portion of the bond, and we were getting 11.2% cash on cash. It was phenomenal, and that property is still running today. So there's something else we can say.
I'll talk about the three.
Kev does the 3 magic beans.
I call them the 3 magic beans. So, obviously that's exciting on its own, but there's 3 things that happen in America that just make property there just so amazing for an entrepreneur or an investor. And the first one is depreciation. So you can depreciate your asset over 27 years or 30 years, or 40 years, 39 years. Whether it's residential or commercial residential, I'll explain it now, or medical. Those are the 2 areas we focus on. So really what happens is they have an accounting term in America called free cash flow. It's actually an accounting term, free cash flow, which means that the 7.6% return that you're seeing coming in through in dollars is actually going to be tax-free because you're offsetting the income against the depreciation of the building. And what they say in America is, for example, let's take our multi-family product, which is a block of flats. They say over 27.5 years, you will spend as much money upkeeping that building as it cost you to buy it when you bought it originally. So you can depreciate it flat line over 27.5 years. So your income, if we've done our bit right, our income that we get out of the building is going to be a little bit lower than the depreciation number. So you're not taxed on your income. And even with the double taxation treaty between South Africa and here, if you're showing a 0, you can't get taxed on 0. If you're declaring 0 income in America, you can't.
0 times 0 is 0.
Yeah.
So whether you're at 45% here or at 5%, it makes no difference. Your cash flow is free cash flow.
So that's your depreciation. The second thing is, obviously what happens is when we have a liquidity event and there's a capital gains event, because all of our projects are, you'll see none of them are just vanilla. We're always looking for things to get an outsized return. So we've always got some sort of intervention, some sort of tax incentive, some sort of deduction that we add to the property as well to be able to get an outsized return. If you want just a vanilla 8%, 7% return, you can buy a REIT and you'll get the liquidity of a REIT. This is not a liquid asset. This is a 3 to 6 year program for each of the investments you do. So, so when we do have a liquidity event, which we have a capital gains event, in America you can do a thing called the 1031 exchange, which I think is amazing. And basically what it says is that if we designate those funds from the sale to go into a 1031 exchange, then all the funds from the project go into a separate attorney's account. They have a 1031 attorney's account. And as long as we redeploy those funds into another project within 6 months of sale, you can defer your capital gains tax. And there's a couple of people we've met in America who've been doing it. There's one couple there that have been doing it for, one family there that have been doing it for 95 years, 4 generations. They've deferred the capital gain. They've got that's probably one of the biggest personal private portfolios I've ever seen. They own half of Atlanta. And what is amazing for me is that because the free cash flow is so enormous, they never need to realize that, at some point they're going to get. Imagine if Saul said to you, you know what, you've done so well with the money, keep going. I'm not going to get it from you, I'll get it from your children's children. One day I'll get it from them. But you're doing great, keep going. We're happy with how you're performing. Carry on. I mean, it'll be amazing, right? This is yes. This is no. Unbelievable.